Northern Vibe is about cultivating curiosity. So tell us about you.
Tell you about me. Okay, well, I am an Australian visual artist who jumps back and forth between doing music, filmmaking, illustration, painting. I've written a few books here and there, but really, the thing that dictates my whole universe is being funny. I really enjoy humor and art, and social commentary. So I think a lot of my work has that basis of being a very, to an extent, a very volatile kind of conception, but at the same time I look at the lighter side of it. I treat my artworks as the most optimistic, pessimistic viewpoint.
And it's funny how those two things are interlinked. But look, how do you make a living? Like, if you don't mind me asking, have you monetized this?
No. Well, I mean, if I wanted to make a real living, I'd give up on art and become a plumber, but I don't think that's in the pipeline there. So, I jump back and forth between a lot of commission work. I do stand-up comedy as well, which generates a little bit of cash here and there. But I think a good portion of my income has been generated through visual artwork commissions, as well as filmmaking and music composition. And the music composition, I find actually probably one of the more enjoyable aspects of the whole thing, because I wasn't really a musician for a long time, and then I just kind of fell into it. Now I just love every second of music.
That's great. I always ask that because people have this idea that creativity and money are polar opposites, and that being creative won't make you a living. But the more I talk to people, the more I see that that's not the case.
Well, we live in a world where, as a graphic designer, let's say you're moving away from the completely artistic version, you're moving towards graphic design, which I see as kind of the military version of art. It's very precise. It's very there's a point to it. It's graphic design. I think that a lot of graphic designs got hit hard in the last couple of years when people were you don't need to hire a graphic designer these days. You can jump online and hire somebody online type thing, and it has caused a bit of a stir within the creative community and trying to build a stable financial bed. But I think there's always going to be a reason to be an artist. Everybody needs a creative person on board, and I've always said this before. I think that every industry should be employing an artist, whether they're a visual artist or they're a conceptual creative person, because I think that every single industry would hugely benefit from just a very eccentric or creative person to weigh up the, and a lot of the time creative work isn't very viable, or it's not very practical. But I think having that creative voice in any industry is hugely valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you mind telling us about your background, your family, your upbringing?
Absolutely. So I currently live in Brisbane, of all places, but I grew up in Cairns, and I'm sure you know all about Cairns.
Now, when you say Cairns, there's only one thing I've got to pull you up. When you say Cairns, I want it echoing through your nose. Cairns. Okay, I want to hear the drawl. We're far north Queenslanders. I want echo through the nose and drawl.
Cairns.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
I was actually about an hour. I was actually towards Atherton for the majority of my life, and I think that location of the world made such a huge impression of me. Not necessarily for the right reasons, but not necessarily for the wrong reasons. I was incredibly bored in Cairns, but at the same time, I adore the culture. I think Cairns has a very, very traditional cowboy culture about it. If I could, that's a very blunt way to put it, but I love it. I think that there is a certain ridiculousness about Atherton and Cairns, which have really, really kind of molded me to an extent. And then coming to Brisbane, there was a bit of a culture shock, because I was the country kid, and now I'm in the big city. And I think a lot of people might even be, shocked by that, because when you look at the city mentality or the lifestyle compared to, you know, outback Queensland, it's totally different. But within that, I was born in Atherton. I had a huge amount of support from my family. I could be as depraved and disgusting as possible, and they were totally into it. They said, "Look, he's gonna be either a deadbeat or an artist or both," so they let me do it.
Yeah. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive, really, are they? There's always this idea that people are like leaves blown along the winds of socioeconomics, that there's this linear progression. It's like you're here, you do this, and the product spits out. But I've always been interested in the reactionaries, in people who to some extent rebel against the structure of their upbringing and stuff like that. I've always been intrigued with that mindset.
Oh, I was going to say that I definitely agree. And I find rebellion very, very useful tool. I was fortunate enough to not be able to rebel against my family, because I feel like anything I did, they'd probably be able to, justify for the most part, because I don't want to break any hearts here, but as weird as I am, I'm a fairly normal standard human. So rebellion in my family was not really an option. I could watch the horror movies, and I could walk down the street and come back at a late hour because my parents trusted me. It seemed like my biggest rebellion was a rebellion from fraudulent society. There's a broken aspect of social media, and there's a broken aspect of the schooling system, which I don't agree with. So my rebellion was purely social. It wasn't a kind of a juvenile upbringing rebellion. It was, more of an adult adolescence growing up. Yeah.
I find that intriguing. And I've dealt a lot in the Indigenous space and spent quite a bit of time up in Cape York. And I hardly need to tell you, there's a lot of socioeconomic problems up there. And everyone always talks like, well, everybody's a product of their environment. And that's true to a certain extent. Of course, I'm a product of my environment. You're a product of your environment. But I saw a lot of people rebel against the negative aspects of their upbringing, some of the negative aspects of whatever it is, cultural environment they were in, and become reactionaries. And I found that really, really empowering, because we always associate, when you say rebel, we always associate it with, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but some, long-haired guy walking down the street with, but it depends on the context. But if you were brought up in a completely dysfunctional community and you become functional, well, then you're a rebel. Did you see what I mean? You've broken out of the mold of that. And I find that mindset incredible.
Absolutely. And I think, but I believe that everybody has a reason to rebel against something. Everybody is a victim of some sort of fraudulent mentality or some sort of shallow ideas that have been placed on them from birth, or maybe they got it from on their journey that they're going through. But I don't think all lessons we learned aren't practical and aren't valuable. So I mean, rebelling against anything, I think, can be, or rebelling against your upbringing can be hugely healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that leads us into marginality, because again, if you're from a dysfunctional background and you become a functional person, you're marginal. Let's discuss marginality. What do you think is marginal in society nowadays?
Common sense is dying, and I think common sense is dying because there's a lot of factors that I think lay on top of each other. One that I think is directly affecting the children today, and I'm going to call them children, but I'm not that much older than them, is social media. I'm very against it for a lot of reasons. I just genuinely think that kids these days aren't utilizing the platform in a proper manner, and I also think that the way the platform has been established has given these kids reason to die very easily. And so I think that is one of the things that makes common sense lacking in our society, you know, just to look at this whole thing and be like, whoa, there's a huge problem here. We're not fixing it. But that's only one factor. There's a bunch of other factors.
So that's a rebellion against nihilism. Because if you're living in a society that says there is no meaning and point, and you say, actually, there kind of is, you're rebelling against nihilism.
Well, I mean, sometimes the point is to be pointless, you know. Sometimes you just got to exist. But I think that living a healthy life is, you know, if you're just going to exist, you might as well live a good life, you know, and don't force yourself into a place where somebody can destroy you, you know. And that's what the danger of the internet is unbelievable, you know, especially for somebody who's not prepared to deal with it.
Right. Now, this is going to lead us into self-expression and, of course, your art. Look, would you mind telling us about your art, and if you have any paintings or anything with you, showing them as props and walking through and discussing it, so we can give the viewers some contextual understanding of what you've achieved and what your art is.
Absolutely. And thank you for, again, having me on the show, mate. I really appreciate it. This is a great experience. So the artwork that I do is, to summarize it best, I choose to pick on the more aggressive side of life. You know, I don't like painting flowers, and I don't like just painting your standard you know, landscape. It just doesn't really interest me. As beautiful as it can be, I find it incredibly boring. So I've kind of made my my artistic voice way more eccentric and way more violent to an extent, but it really does come down to satire. And this is communicated through all my artworks, whether I'm writing a book or I'm making a film or I'm even doing stand-up comedy. I choose to play a character. You know, that's the artistic voice behind this all. I play a version of myself. You know, and I'm a fairly normal person, but you know, the person I present myself out as is much more deranged and unstable. And for me, I look at that as another commentary. You know, this person who is creating this artwork and publishing it online is the villain. You know, I'm moving away from the idea that when you go on social media, you need to be loved and you've got to be accepted and you've got to be, you know, this beautiful sparkling gem. I would rather go online and present this artwork from the Captain Hook. You know, I like that better. Somebody has to be the villain. And when you have that kind of mentality where you're saying, well, my artwork is evil, or it's not incredibly optimistic or happy, it gives you so much more liberation. You know, you can be gross, you can be unhinged. And I find that is probably the biggest strength is within my work has been to an extent, very confrontational and unconventional, but people seem to enjoy it. You know, people between the ages of 25 to 50 enjoy it. I think anybody below or over that age might lose the message a little bit, but that's fine.
Okay, well, have you got any props that you can show us?
I do. I have one I've been working on right here. Let's see if we can get this in shot. Oh, that's not too bad. Can we get the glare off that? Now this is a how's that turning up on the camera there?
Good.
Hey, beautiful. This is an acrylic painting that I recently have created, and you know, it's probably one of the least volatile pieces I've done, but it has a very religious undertone about it, which I think in itself probably adds a level of social commentary. But really, you know, something like this I would look at and just say it's unnerving for no reason. You know, there is something haunting about an image like this. At least for me, I look at it and say this is haunting, but there's nothing genuinely gothic about it or violent. It's just a very unsettling piece. So and sometimes I do those kind of things where I'm not necessarily trying to stir shit up, but just trying to you know, put people on edge. I like that. I think more people need to be stirred up. You know, you get a bad everybody has has an opinion, and we were discussing this before. Everybody has an opinion, and I think we should vocally express them.
Yeah, I saw some of your comedy work, and I'm going to put the hyperlinks for our listeners there. When you get up on stage, you just start abusing the producers and abusing the audience and abusing anyone else. And initially, I was sort of sitting there going, and you could see the audience going, because they didn't know what to do. They were like, But after a while, you could see they started to get it. It's like, no, this guy's a jester. You know, he's and you could see they started getting a lot more comfortable. That's look, I'm going to just come out and ask this. There's this really interesting concept that I absolutely love. That's discussed a lot in the symbolic world. It's something I get right into, and that's this idea of a holy fool, and that is someone who appears to be really against something, but is actually trying to flip the world back to where it should be. So let's frame it in the context of what you're talking about before as common sense. Now, okay, that's really subjective, but I think we both being coming from Australia and you coming from Cairns, we both have a certain understanding of what that means. So you're trying to get back to that. That's a holy fool in action. That if you think of Shakespeare's jesters, but the job of the jester in Shakespeare, in King Lear, was to be wise, was to tell the king, hey, you're out of line. You shouldn't be doing this. But I can tell you in a humorous way that you're not going to be offended. And I might seem like I'm playing the fool, and I might seem like I'm being blasphemous, and I might seem like I'm poking your authority and knocking it. But what I'm actually trying to do is bolster your authority and flip the world back onto its head the way it should be.
Absolutely. And you pretty much summarized that perfectly, actually. You know, it is that, and again, going back to playing the villain, sometimes you play the villain to show people what the wrong opinion is, you know? I mean, I can justifiably stand up on stage and act like a jerk and yell at people and say fairly offensive content, but I assume that the people who are actually going to understand it will understand, look, he is making fun of people who act like this, you know? He's making fun of the unstable kind of unpleasant humans that seem to dwell across the earth. And, you know, I often find, and that's the other humor of it, you know, it's anti-humor, you know, it's funny because it's terribly unfunny, you know, and it's funny because I'm making a fool of myself. I'm getting on stage and I'm being this otherwise unpleasant creature, you know, and you know, you put it best. It's all about playing the what did you call it? The ultimate fool. So
the holy fool.
The holy fool. I think that's an exceptional title.
The holy fool, but it's true. It's an ancient trope. It's a really, really old trope. You've got a bit of a skill stack, so we can see that you can paint. We know that you're a bit of a graphic designer. You've done stand-up comedy, but you also do music, and we can't play all of it. But I'm going to play a little bit of one of your work. And for the listeners out there, Adam has a couple of sites. I'll be putting the hyperlinks up there, but it's lovely aroma. I just love it. And so you jump on Adam's website here. It's called Lovely Aroma, Sad and Ugly Stuff by Adam Plant. He's got all these different categories of things that he does. So Adam's done some films. They're odd, but I think they're worth watching. The pictures definitely are. The blog is interesting. And I like the music. So really quickly, we're going to play a little bit of Ego Wax. And as you can see for the listeners, you've got sing along for the kids. So we'll play it. We'll play about 30 seconds of this.
Watching the world from afar, somewhere out where no one can tell who to move from my throne. I'll just sit waxing my ego at home.
So as much as I want to play the whole thing, the listeners, I'll put the hyperlink there. You can see it starts off normal and then it flips into that. I genuinely, that's why I picked that song. It's my favorite of your work. But you've got a bit of my favorite of your songs. As I said, you've got a bit of a skill stack. Which form of art media do you like the most?
Well, that's really difficult to say because, I probably get the biggest kick out of writing music these days, but it really depends on how I'm feeling. And I also like to combine a lot of my my talents, I guess, so if I want to make a film, I'll compose the music for it. Or if I'm making a song, I'll make the artwork for it, so it seems to me like if I can utilize all things that I do into one project, I've done a good job. I've really enjoyed myself. But if I were to be told tomorrow, you can do one or the other, right now I really enjoy music. Not that I was ever classically trained in any sense. I came across music when I was about 15. I didn't know how to play anything. And it was actually my ex-girlfriend's mum who had an amazing setup in her house that had beautiful amount of instruments, and I just indulged in it, and from that point on, when I was about 15, I just really worked on creating eccentric music. And I mean, from what that small portion that we heard from Ego Wax, that is a very eccentric kind of song. It jumps from about 3 genres. I think there was, I think there's a doo-wop ending, there's a bit of a hard rock middle, there's a musical aspect to it with the big band, and I like to combine those things, and it gives me so much joy to have to hear something in my head and say, I'd like to hear that with a trumpet, and that there's something about that really really connects with me.
That's well, generally, how does the public respond to your work? Because it is kind of edgy.
Well, yeah, look, it's really give and take. I mean, like, the people who will get it, and then there's about 99% who don't get it. And I think that's probably put forth in when I do my stand-up shows, probably the best. I'll get up on stage and I'll do my set, and you'll probably have about 90% of people looking at you being like, why are you doing that? What's your end game here? And there's always about 2 people in the front row who are really eating it up. They are laughing at every joke. They're willing to buy the book after the show or whatever. And I've always thought, regardless if you can reach a huge amount of people or 2 people, it's all good. In fact, I would probably rather reach the 2 people than the majority, because I feel like the minority that actually gets it genuinely want this kind of content in their life. The rest of them, they might get a kick out of it, but it's not what they're looking for, so I'm really trying to make artwork for people who enjoy it, and if they don't enjoy it, well, there's years and years and years of other content that they can indulge in.
Yeah, and that comes back to the concept we were discussing before, marginality. But look, you have to recognize that you're at risk of being cancelled. So, cancel culture is a hot topic right now. What sort of things do you see getting cancelled of your work?
Of my work? I think as a considerate human being who is aware of cancel culture, it's always going to be, that monkey on your back. You're always going to be like, oh, something's going to get me. But I also think that cancel culture probably wouldn't exist if everybody was truthful. We can't cancel everybody. I genuinely feel that, everybody has done or said something that we shouldn't have done or said. However, I'm also aware that, or at least I try to make people aware that this is a joke. This is satire. As gross as it can be, it is a joke. and I do push the line, but I do try to really communicate that this is a very, very satirical outlook on the evil side of life. So I'm optimistic that if I get cancelled, I might be able to get a job as a, I don't know, a cleaner afterwards. You know.
Who or what has influenced your work the most?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, I there's about a handful of people I genuinely I treat as figures of incredible artistic forces, at least, you know. So I try to, I've got about 10 people in my life, at least musically, that I listen to on repeat. And then I've got about 3 artists, 3 visual artists that I could say genuinely have done a huge amount of work that has influenced me. And then there's probably about 3 filmmakers who have done the same job. So it's a very narrow niche kind of perspective. But right now, you know, I've been listening to a lot of Nick Cave, of all things. And are you a Nick Cave fan by any chance?
A little. I think he's a brilliant creative, and I try really. He's one of those chaps I know I should like him, and I share surprisingly high amounts of his worldview, but which is kind of a bit of a shock. But I enjoy it, but it doesn't hook me deeply.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I think that Nick Cave has, and I've heard that exact thing from a lot of people. For me, I've found that Nick Cave has just a very few songs, actually, or very few musicians make me genuinely feel like, wow, this is like really hitting me in the chest, you know, which is why I appreciate Nick Cave so much, from an almost entirely emotional point of view. But if I were to actually say what artists or musicians have influenced my work greatly, I was always way more into the really bizarre people. You know, I have a fascination with Tiny Tim. If you ever came across Tiny Tim,
Yeah.
I adore that man. You know, I've watched interviews and heard every one of his songs, and I just absolutely love everything he did. As well as that, I really have a huge appreciation for Captain Beefheart and Wildman Fisher, and these kind of eccentric no-name musicians who dominated the underground counterculture of the 60s. I just find them to be fascinating historical tales for the most part, and artistically their work is like nothing else. You know, it's purely them. It's 100% them.
Modern music.
Modern music. Well, I want to hear your take on modern music first. Where do you stand?
Well,
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah. Can I exercise at this point in time, I think it's appropriate for me to contact my solicitor and exercise my right to silence in case I say anything which may incriminate. No.
Do you want to call a friend?
Yeah, I want to phone a friend, which for me would be rather limiting. There's no music I don't enjoy. That includes modern music, but there's a certain soullessness now, and I think it's because it concentrates on the message rather than just trying to entertain people, provide a good tune, and there's nothing wrong with commenting. You know, there's nothing. I mean, U2 were big on social commentary. Sunday Bloody Sunday. The Cranberries in the early '90s, when they talked about zombie, that was a very political tune. So I've got no problem. I got no problem with that in modern times. But there's a certain amount of virtue signaling and soullessness about it today. It just doesn't, in the same way that I really admire Nick Cave and I admire a lot of modern music, it doesn't hook me, with the exception of Imagine Dragons, which I got to say my boy got me onto, and I've got 2 daughters. So I really shouldn't admit this publicly, but I like Katy Perry, and I like I know, and Taylor
that's
Swift.
Cute.
I really like Taylor Swift. I think she's so talented. So I mean, with those kind of exceptions, yeah, generally I'm sorry, they just don't do it for me. And you see it now too, Adam, because they've got all these mixes there. You can always tell when intellectual property is starting to get towards its end. If you're just starting to rehash old stuff all of the time, all these mega mixes, what that basically says is the writers and the artists are kind of like they're running dry.
Yeah, they're done.
They're done.
Yeah. I know. I completely agree. I mean, like I look at and yes, that is, you can't dismiss somebody's musical choices, and I agree. It's all very, very much a personal thing. I don't really resonate with much of modern music at all. A lot of the pop music that will be played on the radio, it doesn't hit me in any way. I if I were to listen to pop music on the radio, actually, I would more likely be listening to the production value than the actual music. It's I find that probably its biggest strength is how well it's being produced. But really, I mean, it's missing so much of what could be considered a deeper meaning. And I don't want to take shots at any particular musician, but I heard a song which is a top 40 song recently, and the lyrics were just so poorly constructed. I just couldn't believe it. And people sing this and they really think that it means something beautiful and wonderful. I just look at it and think it's very well formulated. To an extent, it's too well formulated. It seems like McDonald's food to an extent. And
exactly. It's something made by a computer. It's like
way over processed, way too processed. And so I look at the whole thing and I just don't vibe with modern music. And the other thing I really have a problem with modern music, especially radio music, is 40 years ago we had such diversity on the radio. There was a huge amount of diversity. I mean, you look at the hits of 1977 and without a doubt you'd have disco right next to rock, right next to punk, right next to new wave, right next to country. Now we have pop next to pop on top of pop. The diversity is so watered out, and I like diversity. I like to hear different genres of music.
You see that lack of boldness. You see that lack of integrity and ingenuity in the music as well. And the real irony is these people are like saying, "Oh no, we're the ones that are pushing the boundaries. We're the transgressive ones." It's like, no, you're not. We're the diverse ones. No, you're not. Like there is no diversity there.
Oh no, not at all. And I'd look at it. I mean, Star Wars isn't a perfect example that the modern Star Wars takes, because I felt like, I mean, what year were they made? What, 2015, 2016-ish, year around that time. I think we'll look back on those films and say, wow, they really do capture that time in history perfectly. It really did try to appease all social aspects, as well as, it was Star Wars. I think them playing it safe. I mean, they were in a bad position as well. I mean, what could they have done with the new Star Wars? Where they play it safe, make it an actual good film? I mean, you were gonna step on someone's toes. I would have preferred them to make a good film, but I guess their biggest aspect they were trying to capture was just to fanfare, give them and money, as long as the people who like Star Wars are happy and we make money, then yeah, sure, make a crappy film. But it's the same thing goes with the music industry as well. Nobody wants to take a risk, and when you do take a risk, usually you'll find that it goes. I think that it'll eventually go pretty well. It might not make a lot of money, but people will like it. It'll be something new. It might actually have some justification behind it.
You're totally right. It's Star Wars and those big budget movies that are tanking. And it's these small little independent films where you're seeing really good screenwriting. But I want to bring it back to your work specifically. There's a real touch of macabre about some of your work. Well, most of your work, I would go as far to say. What is it about the human condition that we're drawn to the macabre, and why are you walking in that space?
I've discussed this quite a bit, and I feel like morbid curiosity, which is something a friend of mine had said, was a term that they turned me on to, and I thought, yeah, okay, to be curious about death, to be curious about, and it's something that we're all afflicted by. We're all going to be dead eventually. So it's like that great unknown. What is going to happen? Let's talk about it. but not only that, I also, you know, me personally, I grew up watching Ren and Stimpy. I grew up watching The Simpsons. I grew up watching horror films at a pretty early age. And you know, that kind of thing, that gothic, over the top, eccentric nature. And I think horror films made a huge impact on me, especially the really B grade cheap ones, you know, the ones that you see the strings on the skeleton, and you see the guy's head explode or something like that. You see, you know, all the latex and stuff like that. I love it. And it made such a huge impression just of how silly it was. And, you know, when you look at violence and slapstick violence, I think that it's one of the funniest versions of humor that there could be. And there's a lot of things that are violent. I mean, you look at Charlie Chaplin slipping on a banana skin way back when. I mean, that is an early form of violence, you know? And I think
the Roadrunner and Coyote.
Yeah, exactly. It's all very violent, and people might get upset about violence as well, but I don't believe violence or death within an artwork is necessarily a bad thing. And I also don't think it might actually be a healthy thing.
Besides creativity, what else fills your life?
What else fills my life? Well, you know, I'm a bit of a weird guy. You know, I collect vinyl records. I collect cups, actually. You know, I've been collecting these cups I find at op shops, secondhand stores. And my favorite, this is really off topic, people, like, you know, just to put that out there, but collecting cups has been a huge thing in my life. And my favorite cups are the cups that somebody has clearly made themselves. You know, maybe they've printed their child on it, or maybe it's a graduation cup. And I somehow come across them and I buy them. So I have a small army of very important cups that I have no idea where they came from, and they have random people on them who I don't actually know. So that gives me a lot of joy. I don't know why. And other than that, I am a huge music historian. I enjoy watching documentaries about musicians. Even if they're musicians I hate, I'll eat it up.
Well, is there anything you'd like to add?
To the wonderful audiences, check out my artwork. I'm working with a lot of beautiful people right now. The Rare Squid Boys in Toowoomba, they're wonderful filmmakers. I'm working with the wonderful Dexter Black. He's a wonderful musician. The beautiful Sarah Smith. She's a wonderful makeup artist. All these beautiful people who I've had the opportunity to communicate and collaborate with recently. So there's a lot of good stuff coming for you very shortly. And finally, I'd like to say that everybody, be yourself, express yourself, communicate freely, be vulnerable, be strong, and it's all going to work out wonderful. Well, there are websites. My personal website is lonelyaroma.com. And I also run a dirty little art community called Easy Sleaze Art, which easysleaze.com. It has a lot of different artists, a lot of variety. And we're actually producing a book very shortly. Our second book will be a community magazine featuring a huge diversity of wonderful artists. That book will hopefully be coming out next year. So we're taking submissions now. If there's any listeners out there wanting to submit artwork or content or really anything, here's your shot. Send it over.
Great. And if people need to contact you, the best way is through those websites, which I'm sure you saw up on screen while you were talking.
Oh, you can just yell into the wind. You know,
Oh,
I'll
right.
hear it.
All right.
I'll hear it in here.
Okay. Smoke signal? Pigeons?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. I'm old fashioned.